For our COBT listeners and viewers, it's Maynard Mike and Gabe Collins here with something that we're particularly lucky to get to do. We're going to get to talk to Dr. Tatiana Mitrova today. Tatiana is a research fellow at the Center on Global Energy Policy at Columbia. She is a longtime scholar and expert in everything related to Russian politics, Russian geopolitics, Russian energy, Russian oil, Russian exports, the country's interactions with the rest of us, and with what's been going on recently with some drone attacks on Russian export infrastructure. We saw some of Tatiana's work. We reached out to her, and she graciously agreed to come and visit with us and help us understand what is happening from the view of the Kremlin. So, Tatiana, thank you so much for joining us. We're really ecstatic about this conversation today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Happy to be here.
And I even got to use a little college Russian with Tatiana yesterday. So I'll try not to do that too much.
You did it great, by the way.
Oh, this was too nice. I hope my relatives watch this episode. Mike, what would you tell us about what's going on in the market today?
Yeah, Maynard, I just want to say that we're shooting a little early today. So stuff that I quote could really change here in the next couple hours.
Just
but as
with today's world.
Exactly. So, just to give you an idea what's going on today, you've got basically the Dow is up 600 points, something like that. S&P is up 1.5%. So a really good day in U.S. markets. You have 10-year bond yields down a little bit, but you have oil prices up around $2 for TI to about $104 a barrel. And you have basically Brent up around $6 per barrel today to around 119, 120. So that WTI, the Brent WTI spreads around $15 per barrel. That's about the widest it's been in forever. And so clearly that's something to be keeping an eye on. I would note that we're essentially 1 month in now in this Iran war, and just kind of give you an idea of where things have gone. WTI is up around, $40 a barrel. It's up 55%. Brent's up around $50 a barrel, up 65%. TTF gas prices in Europe, which on a dollar equivalent basis are up about, they've gone from $11 per M to around $18 to $19 an M. That's up 65%. What's really interesting to me is we already talked about the Brent TI, but if you look at, the U.S. market, the S&P, it's down about 7%. Energy's up around 13%. And the point we've been making here for the last 2 or 3 weeks, there is a big disconnect in physical markets for oil and paper markets. Big disconnect. We saw, price of, look at Urals prices have come up. They're actually trading at or better than Brent right now. You had Oman barrel prices go up to $175 to $180 a barrel. Every day that goes by, every week that goes by, and we're getting to the point where the last barrels that left the Strait of Hormuz have been delivered. Now we're going to start digging into basically inventories. And if you think about the 400 million barrels of inventories for the SPRs that were agreed on globally, you're talking about 10 million barrels cut in the Gulf, in the Strait. So you're now talking 30 to 40 days before that's exhausted. I don't know about you, but it doesn't look like we're any closer to this thing being resolved at this point in time. And so I think physical prices is what you need to be looking at. Brent, you need to keep an eye on. Urals prices, you need to be keeping an eye on. There just looks like there's a big disconnect. And like I said, U.S. markets are down 7%. I keep hearing people saying this is catastrophic. This is like the biggest thing we've ever seen in our lives. And, equity markets are disconnected from energy markets. So we don't want to overreact. We want to just basically, say and tell you what we're seeing today in markets. But like I said, every day that goes by and this disconnect basically stays out there, I think there's going to be more and more risk. And then you're starting to hear that, with President Trump, as he's basically attacking countries, telling them to say, like UK, hey, you guys patrol the Strait of Hormuz. We're trying to get out of this. So I just think it's really, really difficult to measure markets right now. Tell you where market's going, because even the best of experts that tell you where they think it's going to go are just lying to you. We just don't know how this is going to play out. A lot of risk in the markets, a lot of disconnect. And so we'll just end it there, Maynard.
Okay. Tatiana, thank you so much for joining us to talk about Russia. And when I reached out to you, I think one of the, the first things that was on our minds is the Iran conflict or war has really heightened everybody's perceptions and understanding of how drones can be used to create a lot of problems, missiles certainly too. And this really got its start in the Ukraine-Russia war, where drones have been taken to a whole new level. And then right in the middle of all this, Ukraine does a strike on some Baltic export infrastructure. Talk to us about, I guess, to start with the Russia-Ukraine conflict and then this most recent attack and just how it feels from the Russian perspective here. There's so many forces at work. We got a lot of places we can go with this, Tatiana. So that's, again, why we're so excited to have you.
Well, you are absolutely correct that this new energy warfare basically started with Russia-Ukrainian conflict. And I wouldn't limit it only to drone attacks, though they are absolutely new at the scale and the damage they can create. But also, I think we should keep in mind that the very fact of massive regular attacks on the energy infrastructure is also something new that we have not experienced for many decades. So when we were talking about energy security, people were normally thinking about broader security, like having inventories, diversifying. Now energy security is just physical security of your assets. And Russian refineries, Russian oil and gas companies, they are now studying how to build anti-drone defense, how to organize regular patrols in order to avoid sabotage, and so on and so forth. So it's a different modus of operations for the energy companies. How it is felt? Well, I think now in the fifth year of the war starting already, there is a bit of this war fatigue. Yeah, there is a obviously accumulated feeling that it would be much better for the energy business for all this mess to stop. But at the same time, there is no visible way out, at least no easy solution in this war of attrition where Russia and Ukraine find themselves now. There were certain hopes, I should say, a year ago when all these US-Russia, US-Ukraine trilateral negotiations started. At least on the Russian side, there were hopes that it may end up not necessarily with peace, but at least some sort of ceasefire, which would allow the energy sector to restart normal life, yeah, and at least to get rid of the most painful and unpleasant sanctions. Now, I think there is a certain disappointment. Nothing has happened. And what I see from the energy business perspective, the guys are just preparing to live in this new world, to operate in this new, very stressed environment for longer.
I was wondering, there was this window, you will know so much better than us, but it did seem like there was a window right when Trump took office where Zelensky and Trump, had not, they were offsides with each other. It looked like there was a moment there where there could have been a deal. Is there a sense in Russia, do you think, or that an opportunity was missed to take a deal that could have shut this down? Because it seemed like Putin at some level was kind of the problem. I mean, that's the understatement of the century, but is there a sense that that window was missed, that the Russians missed a window to do a better deal?
I would put it a different way. So
Okay.
the window for reaching certain arrangement was missed. Yeah, that's what I hear from Moscow. But this window anyway was unacceptable for Putin because the key thing he was insisting on were the new territories, as they call, like Donetsk, Lugansk regions. So the territories that Russia occupied, and then after referendum announced constitutionally part of Russia. So if he doesn't gain these territories, he loses his face. And he cannot then explain domestically why the hell he started this war at all. if there are no gains, no positive results. So the deal that Trump basically was proposing to Putin, it was attractive. Remember all these discussions about joint economic projects in Arctic with rare earths, with oil and gas, and so on. But in order to move there, Putin should have to give up on Ukraine. And this is something, I should say, existentially unacceptable for him. So I'm afraid that the window was a bit of mirage.
I see. Because it just wasn't, it's just not practical that Putin's going to agree to something where he didn't win something.
Absolutely.
So maybe you mentioned that Russian energy companies having to be having to think about their defenses around these around their infrastructure. It seems like the Ukrainians have gotten better and better at hitting things farther and farther away with more and more capability. Is that really what's happened, and how should we all, how did that happen?
You know, I'm definitely not a military expert, but what I see from the range of attacks and the scale of attacks, definitely they are progressing very fast. And it is, you know, as a typical competition between the attackers and those who are protecting. So first, Ukraine had very strong leverage because Russia didn't dispose any drones at all. It had to buy them from Turkey, from Iran. There was no domestic production. There were no people capable of managing those drones. Then, step by step, Russian side also started to increase its expertise. And at a certain point, I should say, like a year ago, they nearly equaled. Then Ukraine started to introduce new tactics. Last summer, 2025, August, September, they started to send swamps of drones in waves. So it's not just one attack, but they follow again and again and again. And that was the reason for quite considerable disruption for the Russian refineries. In September 2025, there was a moment when nearly 40% of all the Russian refining capacities were affected. So that was felt. It resulted in a certain domestic fuel crisis and reduced exports of petroleum products. But then I think, again, Russian side built up certain additional layers of defense, which I don't know how they are called, but I can assume that they made something to be better protected. But right now, with the very recent wave of attacks on the seaports, not only on refineries, though refineries are also getting attacked, but also on the export infrastructure. Novorossiysk in the Black Sea, Druzhba pipeline leading to Europe, and the Baltic ports in Primorsk and Ust-Luga. And these were really very massive, again, swamps. Yeah, Ust-Luga this night was attacked again for the 5th time in a row during 1 week. And this has resulted into massive fires, which you can see even from satellite photos, into the loss of capacity. Right now, it's about 40% of export capacity. Yeah, so this headline from Reuters was shocking. Yeah, it doesn't mean that these capacity is lost forever. Yeah, but right now it's not operational. It needs a certain repair, maintenance before it can start. And obviously, it resulted in a 40% loss of Russian oil exports last week.
And what do you make of these stories? It's Tuesday, obviously. There were stories this morning that I guess Zelensky was sharing that the European countries or somebody was asking him to stop hitting Russian oil infrastructure in the midst of the Iran war. I'm paraphrasing, but do you think those stories are accurate? Does that surprise you? How do you see this is the way in which the Iran war and the Ukraine war are obviously interacting around oil price?
Yes, for sure. I'm not surprised at all. So there are usual suspects like Hungary and Slovakia, which were always very keen to have more Russian hydrocarbons and preventing European Union from banning Russian oil and gas supplies as much as they could. But I think there are many other countries in Europe which realize that, as Mike said at the very beginning, now it's the time when the last cargoes from the Gulf are approaching to the customers, and then what's next? You just open all the inventories, and that's it. So each barrel counts, and if suddenly more than 1 million barrels per day disappear from the market, it means just that the prices are going up further. Which is quite painful for many economies. So I'm pretty sure that it's not only European countries, but many other importing countries which are very concerned because, again, each 1 million barrels per day is important now.
I wonder if I could just ask you one question while I was just thinking about it, because Tatiana, one of the things that's been happening in the last 3-4 weeks, the Venezuela operation happened, then of course the Iran war has started, and it seems like the American military and the Israeli military have been performing at this high level, and I'm just curious about, do you perceive that attitudes within Russia? Because remember this, when the Ukraine war started, Biden offered a plane to Zelensky, within the first few days, like it was supposed. So it's gone on for much longer than anyone expected, and the Ukrainians are now striking things. I just wonder, what is the Russian perception of their military and of their strength, and is this an issue for Putin? Like, how does that play out in the popular mindset and press?
I should say that during the last 4 years, there was an amazing propaganda and brainwashing. So initially, many people I remember were very frightened and disappointed by this war. Not only the ordinary people, but people from the government were shocked. The whole economic bloc, they had no idea that it's under preparation. But then slowly, they started to get more supportive. First of all, because propaganda was presenting it like an existential threat for Russia. Ukraine was preparing to attack. If we wouldn't protect ourselves, there would be a dirty nuclear bomb or whatever. So there were many versions of the catastrophe that was approaching. Anyway, we had to protect ourselves and look, all the Western, all the whole Western civilization, Europe and the US, they are so aggressive against us. Now they've shown their real face. They hate us. They are ready to impose as much sanctions as possible. They just want to destroy Russia and to get all our resources and our space. Yeah, and then like a legitimate next step for the population, for bureaucrats, for people in the companies. Okay, if it's the matter of my survival, if I'm surrounded by the enemies, like in zombie apocalypses, who are trying to destroy me, I have to protect myself. Yeah, so there was an amazing unification, I should say, and cementing of the population. Yeah, people are still complaining about the war. There are lots of inconveniences, starting from the fact that you can no longer use your Visa or MasterCard. You can hardly travel abroad. Your telephone, your mobile is not working because of drone attacks, and all the networks are just getting switched off for days and weeks. Yeah, and many other, like inflation is booming, but at the same time, the key message is, okay, what is the other option? We do not have any choice, so we have to live with that, and we have to adapt to this new reality. The population is adapting, and the businesses are adapting.
Do you think it's fair? You know, this is why we love talking to you. You understand this so much better than we do. But the early on in the war, you know, there was the guy Prigozhin. Am I saying that right?
Prigozhin.
Prigozhin. Sorry, Prigozhin. So that was a crazy chapter when the war wasn't going well, and then here this guy was going to march on Moscow or whatever his plan was, and then of course he's later dies, you know, or is killed. Like that chapter, it looked like, you know, Putin was vulnerable. But I think what you're pointing out is 5 years in, after all the use of the campaign and the eliminating dissent, that he's actually in a very strong position. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that where it sits?
More or less. So there is no visible opposition. Prigozhin, I think, was the first and the last strike, and that's it. His fate is very demonstrative for the others who could decide also to make a coup. Yeah. Many Western experts were hoping that Russian elites will unify and organize a putsch, remove Putin, and then go into negotiations. But now I think it's all cleaned up, and there are no people ready for any protest against Putin or ready to fight with him for power. But at the same time, the overall level of support for him is slowly declining. Yeah, so it's like right now, the level of support is exactly at the same level as it was right before the war. So it's about 70% officially. Yeah, you understand, officially people are very cautious in what they are saying, but it used to go like up to 90 and then sluggishing down to 70 again. So people are not happy. They don't like it, but it's like a situation of dead end. They feel that they don't have any other choice, and they prefer the typical message that I hear from many people I know in Moscow and St. Petersburg. They are saying, okay, I have one life, it's short. I just want to live, to enjoy life, to spend time with my family and relatives, to have fun, and that's it. I'm unlucky to live in this country in this period of time, but I want to enjoy life as much as possible. The other people are trying to build their careers, and I can assure you that now there are fantastic career opportunities in Russia, as all the expats left and many of the Russians went abroad as well. So there is nearly zero unemployment rate because men are all on the front line. So there is a huge hunger for any specialist. The salaries are very high, even compared to certain European or US levels. So there are certain benefits of being in Russia now, especially for ambitious people. They feel quite rewarded. The others are just patiently waiting until the end of the war.
I say, okay, so into this backdrop, so you have this extended war in Ukraine, you have these stresses you're talking about. Into this backdrop comes the US-Israeli assault on Iran. So now we're, to Mike's point, we're a month into that. What would you say has been and obviously oil prices are up a ton. The Russians make money selling oil. Talk to us about the Russian perspective on this conflict with Iran. Like, are they pleased, excited, relieved, angry? Like, what is the perspective from the Kremlin on, or from Russia broadly on this?
I would say relieved. Yeah, like, thanks God, it's not us. Iran has never been a real like friend or a real ally. It was rather a useful counterparty, another bad guy which was attracting a lot of attention instead of Russia. a good help with the drones, certain useful coordination in terms of oil, but very, very limited, and nearly, I should say, like negligible trade between Russia and Iran. So I think, at least what I see from most of the statements from the Kremlin, from the Russian government, it's quite opportunistic. There is a wonderful opportunity to free ride on high prices. It's once in a lifetime chance to earn this windfall, which was absolutely unpredictable. In the end of February, just 2 days before the war in the Gulf started, actually, Russian economic ministry was preparing for the massive budget cuts because oil and gas revenues fell down by 40% in the beginning of 2026. So the situation was already becoming desperate, and then suddenly, whoops, and the prices are going through the roof. Discounts between Urals and Brent basically disappear, as Mike said. And suddenly all the customers which were refusing to take sanctioned Russian oil are again keen to buy it. So obviously that's a good relief. It also switches attention from Ukraine. It undermines weapon supplies to Ukraine because the US need all these missiles now for the Gulf operation. And basically, it moves the Ukraine from the main focus. Yeah, so Russia can prepare for the summer military campaign, hoping to take the missing regions. Yeah, and then maybe to start these peace negotiations. But even if not, if there are no negotiations, this additional windfall, it actually buys Russia additional time. In this war of attrition between Russia and Ukraine, time is the key. For Russia now, it's a huge present.
Man, I've got so many questions, but we'll just maybe we'll, I didn't mention this in the lead-in, but you had a Russian tanker basically come to Cuba today, unloading 800,000 barrels of crude oil. It's really interesting to think about 2 weeks ago when that ship was making its way there, how people were saying, no way this is going to dock there. The U.S. is going to stop them. They're not going to allow it to get through. And lo and behold, Trump said, yeah, these people are under a lot of pressure. They needed oil. Now it's only 7 to 10 days of supply, but it really kind of makes me think about, I'd love to hear your perspective. If Russia was, Cuba, they've been cut out of essentially. Venezuela, they've been cut out of. I mean, just what is the whole? It seems like this hemisphere that Russia has lost a lot of its dominance here in the last 3, 4, 5 months. What is your perspective? Do you think in the Russian government right now and the Russian people? Is it more of a, hey, you know what? We've got a lot of troubles at home. We don't have to worry about Cuba. We don't have to worry about, Venezuela because we got to focus on our own survival here. I mean, what is the thought process?
Yeah, I think if you ask people in the street, that would be exactly their response. But at the same time, on the governmental level, I believe there is still this feeling that we have at least to behave and to show up as a great power, not completely dismissing our allies and like formal friends. So with Venezuela, with Iran, the rhetorics from Kremlin each time was like, we condemn what is happening and we call for peace and we send all the moral support to our friends. This time with Cuba, it is more physical support, very limited, as you mentioned, but I think it's rather not very expensive gesture because which is needed to properly position Russia for the global south. Because Venezuela, Iran, Cuba, these are not the only countries which are building relationship with Russia. And after Venezuela, I think I've seen quite a lot of concerns from the other partners that, okay, it means that Russia can just leave you after supplying you all the missiles which do not work. So that was a bad reputation, bad for the image, bad for the military sales. And I think it's just not very expensive opportunity to slightly, refurbish it.
Prior to the Iranian war, the Europeans were looking to get off of Russian supplies. They were going this energy transition, and it seems like now that they're being cut off from the Strait of Hormuz, they're now rethinking their policy just globally about how they're going to be supplied with energy. Obviously, the U.S. will be a beneficiary through LNG and stuff of that nature, but it also seems like there could be an opening for Russia potentially to resupply gas and do some other things, because you got to look at diversification of supply. I mean, is there any potential truth to that? Is that something where we sit there 2, 3, 4 years from now, there's more gas coming from Russia to Europe because you know what, we've got to save our industrial industries. We can't count on, the Strait of Hormuz being open.
This is true, and I hear quite many voices inside the EU, primarily from the industrialists, yeah, but also most of the right-wing parties. They are saying, "Come on, just stop banning Russian oil and gas, and then you can replace the loss of Hormuz." I think it's a bit populist. Because in reality, it's quite difficult to do, especially when we are talking about gas. So Nord Stream is destroyed. There is one line which survived, but it has never received any regulatory permit. So from the legal point of view, it's a complete disaster to make it work. It's just legal swamp for many, many years. Yamal Europe, which goes via Poland, I cannot even imagine scenario in which Poland would ever allow it to restart operations. Turk Stream is already fully utilized, so there is no spare capacity. You cannot add on that, maybe 1-2 billion cubic meters, but that's nothing. And so what is left is Ukrainian transit. And okay, which company, which trader would be ready to sign a long-term contract for pipeline gas supplies via Ukraine under regular bombing attacks and explosions? So that doesn't look possible until some sort of settlement of the conflict. Russian LNG indeed is a more realistic story. It also should be banned, like annual contracts in April and long-term contracts by the end of this year. So frankly, I suspect that this ban might be postponed. For me, it looks quite an acceptable solution for the European Union. Especially they have legal grounds to make it due to the emergency situation and so on. Russian oil, well, okay, if Druzhba is restored, you see there is a dispute now between Zelensky and the European Commission regarding the scale of damage and the time needed for repair. But I also suspect that there will be certain deliveries via Druzhba, deliveries of seaborne crude and products. Well, maybe if the situation will become really disastrous, but oil market is much more liquid than gas market. So even if this oil is leaving from the Russian seaports, it's already good for Europe, wherever it is ending up. But generally, I don't frankly see at the moment that the societies in Europe are ready to a large scale comeback of the Russian hydrocarbons. So as a part of diversification portfolio, probably yes. temporarily on a short-term basis, so no 30-year-long commitments as it was before. Maybe like month ahead deals, something like that. And very, very flexible to be able to get rid of it very fast and to attract it very quickly. So using it more as an option rather than a baseline supplier.
So, Tatiana, I want to ask you a question about money. And we think of oil as the lifeblood of Russia's war effort because I think, we see in Russia the decisions are made by folks in Moscow and St. Petersburg, but the front lines in Ukraine are manned by people who are often from the economically depressed areas, where, in very blunt terms, the payout that your family can receive if you're severely injured or killed might exceed what you could earn the rest of your life working. My impression is a lot of that is underwritten by oil money, and this is part of the reason the Ukrainians are so aggressively engaging in their deep strike campaign. We've seen this week with Ust-Luga and Primorsk and the strikes in the Baltic, how damaging this could be if it's sustained. I want to ask you, if this level of campaign was sustained, what do you think the effects will be back within the internal Russian system? How far is the Russian government from the edge if this oil money flow starts to really get restricted by strikes and physical sanctions?
I'm afraid that if you look at the priorities of the Russian leadership, war is on the top. So if they are running short of money, they will sacrifice all the healthcare, educational expenditures, and all this stuff, which basically they were trying to prevent during the last few years. It was very strange when I was calling my friends in Moscow and asking, how are you guys? The typical answer was, oh, wonderful, come here. You will enjoy time in Patriarchy, and there are plenty of nice restaurants. And by the way, we have a fantastic exhibition. So it sounded like people are living in a different universe. And guys, you have a war ongoing. Oh, no, we don't feel it. The state was spending a lot of money to keep this insulation and this like normality for the major part of population, and buying people who are ready to die from the depressed regions. So the society was fractured into two uneven parts. So if the money pool is shrinking, and as I've mentioned, by the end of February, there was already feeling that this point is approaching. So Russia still has sufficient funds in the National Welfare Fund for maybe like 9-12 months of further operation. So anyway, it's not happening overnight, but the end becomes visible. So if they are again at the same point, they will simply start to mobilize people not only from the depressed regions, but like regular army mobilization without any payment, just as an obligation. Yeah, they will cut all these expenditures for beautiful Moscow lightning and so on. And there are still plenty of reserves to be utilized into this military machine. So far, they were trying to preserve a nice image, but they can give this image up at any moment in favor of much more important existential goal. And Ukraine for Putin is definitely such a task. So I cannot imagine giving up on that. There could be some temporary pause. Yeah, this is something, the scenario I can draw theoretically, but not complete giving up on that. And it means that, the expectation that Russian economy would collapse, I've heard them from the very first day of invasion. And I was trying to explain, no, guys, it's not going to happen, not in 3 months, not even in 3 years. Russia is a very rich country with huge resources. and it can neglect the level of life of its population, in favor of grand idea. I don't think that the economy would collapse even in 1, 2, or 3 years. Rather, it's a slow degradation, erosion of the value and utilization of the past resources and safety cushions. So it's not something dramatic, but rather a slow progress, which at a certain point might result into, I don't know, regime change if it is supported by many other factors. But I would say not in the short or even medium term. So then we are talking about, let's say, a decade or 15 years, which is very long.
So if I can, I'd like to ask you a follow-up question as you've described kind of this erosion process, and I think we can have definitely a debate about timetables, but it seems like underlying this, we are seeing what may be a more tectonic energy geopolitics shift, and that's Russia, which was in the position of being a giant Eurasian cutter before the war, where you could sell east and you could sell west, to becoming a giant Eurasian Iran, where you're basically tied more and more closely to the Chinese market. What are your thoughts on some of the developments that might unfold and some of the risks for Russian power moving forward from that development?
Indeed, this pivot to the east happened completely different way compared to the strategic thinking of the Kremlin. Initially, the idea was indeed to balance between Europe and Asia. Now Europe is basically lost. So there might be some minor incremental flows, but they are not changing the core picture. The key customers for Russia these days for oil are China and India. For gas, it's mainly China, but also the post-Soviet space, CIS. It's, of course, it cannot replace the loss of the European market, neither in terms of volumes nor, of course, in terms of pricing, because China is obviously negotiating for the maximum discounts possible. It is understood in Kremlin. Nobody is happy about it, but at the same time, I should say it's like an acceptable damage. That was really surprising for me, and I believe for many other experts observing what was happening in the first year of the war. Russia easily sacrificed, gave up all its European gas exports in favor of this ideological, basically, idea. It happened already. Russia is looking for the new opportunities. It is trying, obviously, to diversify away from China, looking at Southeast Asia, looking at Africa, at Latin America. So probably just recently, few days ago, Russia signed a deal with Vietnam on nuclear power plant construction. Before that, similar deals were made with the Central Asian countries. So it's not only oil and gas, it's also nuclear capabilities. But I mean, it is the government is trying to figure out how to build new export strategy in these very stressed circumstances. As the costs for gas upstream or oil upstream are still extremely low, it is still profitable. If you are selling oil or gas, even at lower prices to India or to Philippines, it is still profitable. Okay, your margin is shrinking, but the machine keeps working. So as the tax system in Russia is designed in such a way that basically oil and gas companies are receiving like something about $20 to $25 per barrel, whatever the price is. And everything on top of that goes to the state. They do not care that much about this change. What they need is just to ensure that they have customer base and that they can organize the logistics. Then it's more or less okay. Not great, but okay.
Well, one question, Tatiana, the discussion around the Iran conflict or war is how long, and it's also around just how serious the strait being blocked is, and there's a lot there. From the Russian perspective, if I know it's unfair, but are they hoping that this is an extended conflict, that the U.S. stays bogged down with Iran for quite a long time, keeping oil prices high, keeping all this attention elsewhere? I suppose that's an obvious question, but is that what is the speculation in Russia on how long this might last?
So I definitely don't know what's the real thinking in Kremlin, but what I can see from all the indirect signals, yeah, it seems that they are hoping for a longer period, which ensures higher oil prices. Basically, there were many rumors about Russia providing both the satellite data for Iran, but also sending drones, which it started to produce already domestically, also to Iran. I don't know how speculative this is, but I would assume that at least, I mean, Russia benefits from all the chaos and disturbances. And sometimes you need a very tiny action just to provoke this mess. I think in the case of Iranian war, Russia is pretty well positioned to keep just small signals that do not allow the situation to stabilize quickly. Maybe at a certain point, this might change, but for the time being, I would assume at least until mid-autumn, Russia is not interested in any fast resolution of the Hormuz crisis.
And the scope of the increased money to Russia as a result of this. Do you mind just giving us a rough estimate? If we had stayed, $65, $65, $70 oil versus where we are now, like how much money are the Russians making as a result of this?
So during March, I should say, it should have been like about $3 billion, but the very recent attacks on Ust-Luga, Primorsk, and the other facilities, they've basically stolen about, well, slightly less than 1 billion. So part of this windfall, it disappeared. So basically, I should say the magnitude of like $2 to $4 billion, depending on the price and on the volumes that Russia physically can export. It's not saving Russian economy, but every little helps. It's a very good addition.
And sorry, 2 to 4 billion a month.
A month,
is what they pick up.
Yeah.
So from a tactical standpoint, are you expecting the Russians, is this a time when Russia, you mentioned they're gearing up for the summer offensive, but is this a time when you expect that they will really put on the pressure on Ukraine? Is this an opportunistic time for them to try to really lean in and press their offensive? And how do you think Ukraine is going to react? They're in an odd position because their backers, the US and Europe, don't see Iran seemingly the same way. How do you think about the Ukraine war here over the next 3-4 months?
So I assume, again, all the signals that I can see that Russia is preparing for this summer offense. Whether it will be successful or not, that's the question to the military experts. Surprisingly, a previous campaign last year, it didn't result into any significant gains, though there was a very strong motivation for Moscow to really focus on it, especially like before Ankara. Yeah, if they had any significant gains, they could have stopped at this, but they didn't get them. So the desire will be there. The resources, I assume, will be accumulated. The key unknown for me is how Ukraine will resist. It's really a miracle what they are doing. I don't know how exactly and where they are taking these resources, but also creativity and courage to use all these new tactics and approaches without the flow of US and European missiles and other weaponry. It will be extremely difficult, but Ukraine has already several times shown miracles. Therefore, I would better not intervene in this area of military analysis. As it was said at the very beginning, we simply don't know.
Is this just when you think about the situation with Russia and Ukraine from the US perspective, Russia is making more money in this environment. They are you can't help Ukraine as much in this environment. It's taking the pressure off of them. When you think about these forces, is this just one more reason why the US needs to conclude the Iranian war sooner? Because every day that you're fighting with them, you're making the Russia-Ukraine situation harder to solve. You're making Russia wealthier. Like is that how this is affecting US thinking? This is just more pressure to wrap it up sooner?
I might sound very cynical, but frankly, I don't think that the US is so much preoccupied now with the Russia-Ukrainian conflict. It does not affect the US directly. It doesn't influence the US economy or like public support for the administration. It's the headache for Europe, which is actually to a certain benefit for the US. At least it is forcing Europeans to spend more for NATO, again, reducing the pressure for the US. It allows basically to negotiate sometime at the end better terms on cooperation with Russia. It is probably a useful card in US-China negotiations. So I don't see any reason, except for some moral ideas, for the US to hurry with the ending up Russia-Ukrainian conflict at all.
Sorry. Do you mind explaining the China comment? Just the Chinese, so they're leveraged. Explain that one.
This confrontation between the US and China, this real grand competition, it is to a certain extent based on the energy component. And there were lots of speculations that the recent attacks on Venezuela, Iran.
Okay, I follow you.
Yep. But Russia here is a backyard biggest energy supplier for China now. So where Russia will move, will it stay aligned with China, or will it rather switch to be a partner with the US? That's a big question mark.
I see. So if Russia toggles its supplies away from China into this current market, that's the leverage you're talking about on China.
Exactly.
Very interesting. Mike.
I'm sure you're going to ask her what the industry looks like in the next 5 or 10 years, but maybe more of a, humanitarian standpoint. What struck me earlier is you talked about most Russians don't even feel like a war is going on over in Ukraine. They're, unemployment's next to nothing. Life seems good. The government's funding a lot of this stuff. But I also think about it, eventually the war will come to an end. Let's hope. But you have a whole generation of Russians that are just been eliminated, that are going to be injured, that are going to just have, you know, just, you know, uh, just issues in general. What does that mean longer term for just the ability for Russia to grow, having to basically take care of a lot of these people, and just, unemployment goes from 0% to something bigger after that? I mean, what are the not only humanitarian effects, but the economic effects if you think about 5, 6 years down the road once this war ends?
Well, it will largely depend on how exactly it ends, what will be the end game. I should say, in a significant part of the society, those people on the front line are mainly regarded as either criminals, and there are some grounds because many of them were just people from prison sent to the who had signed contract and went to the war, or very poor guys from the depressed regions who decided to earn their fortune this way. So the level of compassion is not that big. Of course, there is a part of very patriotically mooded population. Our boys, we have to take care of them. But then when these boys are coming back after like being injured or something like that, there is already a very frightening statistics on the level of crime that they are bringing with them. So most of the bloody murders which happened in Russia during the last couple of years, these were mobilized military men. And there is a fear in the society about them. They are crazy. They are like they know how to fight, but they cannot control themselves. And there is rather fear and desire to somehow isolate them. On the other hand, the authorities are trying to promote them, to put them in the leading positions, like leaders of Russia and the other programs, which would open to them all the career elevators. So I don't know which of these trends will prevail, but I see that on the level of society itself, there is rather a desire to distance away from them.
Gabe, as you wrap us up, how many troops, how total troops there now in Ukraine, and then how many people have served and are maybe back from the war? Like, what's the size of the pool of people you were just talking about?
So we are talking about, I would say, like 1.8 million people.
How many? Sorry.
1.5, 1.8 million
Okay.
people.
Okay.
So this is, and there are plans to further expand this number. Yeah, that's
Incredible.
huge.
So in terms, I think you brought up some very interesting points about Ukraine. Ukraine is an interesting one, and I think before we discuss maybe what the importance is to United States national interests, which I think is much higher than people appreciate, what's really important is to look at what Ukraine has done, where you've had a roughly 18-month period now where the assistance from the United States in particular has just been steadily diminishing. And yet we've seen their strike capabilities and battlefield capabilities steadily going up. I think the name for one of the drones that they use in these operations, Lyuty, which in Ukrainian means fierce, is a really good description of this entire campaign. And I think what we might see in the coming, and I'm curious your views on this, in the next 12 months or so, is this insulation you described earlier between Moscow and St. Petersburg and elite Russia, in Russia that has to be bleeding on the front lines. is going to be compressed and eroded away more and more, and maybe things get, interesting domestically when the burden that Ukraine has felt all along internally from the conflict starts to be felt in Russia as well. And I'm curious your views on that.
I should say that recently, slowly, it starts to be felt. My friend in St. Petersburg, they are now complaining that they hear the drone explosions basically every night. They feel the smell of the burning Ust-Luga. They don't have a mobile connection. They don't have internet basically for several weeks. It's not a couple of hours, it's several weeks without internet, which obviously is affecting all the small and medium businesses. You cannot pay by card, you cannot order taxi. So it's showing in your lifestyle. It's not yet a real physical threat as it is in Ukraine. Though in Bryansk, Kursk regions, it is already a daily life. So the statistics on people who were killed by drones, civil population, it keeps growing. If Ukraine will be really successful in further developing its capabilities with the drones, with the robots, so it's like it's the war of the future. There are no people on the front line. There are machines now. So like Black Mirror stuff. And it still depends on the financial flows, on the ability to secure supplies of the chips. Without them, nothing flies, nothing works. Whether Russia will be able to cope with that, or whether this insulation between two segments of the society will start to destroy, I don't know. I see that today Moscow is much better positioned actually to call for like massive mobilization, not being too shy, not trying to please everyone, because it was paying for the whole population for the last 4 years quite a good amount of helicopter money. People were enjoying life, so okay, now it's your time to serve. It might come, nevertheless, as a surprise for many people who are not thinking forward, who are just living their lives. But the way how the repression machine is organized, and also the surveillance and basically all the reporting inside the country, I think Stalin would be very jealous about it, actually. It's far less bloody in terms of the scale of repressions and people being jailed or killed. But the machine itself is there. The big brother is watching you 100%. So, and it's very difficult to start to protest or to express that you are unhappy with it. So now it's a trap. Yeah, people are caught into this trap, and they will have to accept these new rules of the game. And by the way, I mean, you are sitting right now in the US, the country which is at war with Iran. How do you feel it? Except for the price of gasoline on the gas station. That's the common perception of any Muscovite. Yeah, so what do I have to do with this war? It's something else. Okay, my state is doing it, but I personally don't support it. I don't want to be involved. I don't want to go to the front line, and I definitely don't want to sacrifice the level of my life in favor of this war. Yeah, it is going to be difficult, but I think as long as the oil prices due to the Strait of Hormuz are staying where they are, Russian government will still have sufficient funds to keep these two worlds insulated.
Tatiana, this has been incredible. Thank you so much. There was so much here, so much you helped us understand. As we wrap up, one thing we have been wondering about is this Trump Xi Jinping meeting that's happening in May. And you mentioned this is, this is the big geopolitical battle, I guess, between these two. And so many of these things are related to the battle between those two, or the contest. Do you see that as a big meeting, that somehow certain things have to happen by then, or that certain things will come to a head by then? Like, is that meeting as important as we sometimes think it is?
I think it is, and for me, the best indication is the very fact that Trump postponed it until after the war with Iran. So either we have this meeting in May, and then there should be already some sort of resolution of the Iranian conflict. Maybe not again, not a peace, but at least some sort of settlement and arrangement. Or the meeting is postponed again, which is also an opportunity. I think China and the US, they are, of course, they are competing, but they are also extremely interdependent. So for the better of the whole world, the best thing is for them to find some sort of a new balance, and again, maybe some arrangement that would keep this interdependency working, preventing any real physical military confrontation between these two powers, because then, unfortunately, then we are heading in World War III, which nobody wants at all.
Well, two last thoughts. Our good mutual friend Jim Hackett said to say hello to you.
Thank you.
And also, spasiba bolshoi.
Spasiba. That was wonderful. You have very good pronunciation.
Oh, thank you. Well, this was tremendous. We'd love to stay in touch with you and keep learning, but this was so helpful to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the great questions and for really, really very nice conversation.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.